So imagine you're attending a lecture by the most profound thinker in the world.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. You've traveled for weeks, you finally take your seat among hundreds of other people, and you were just waiting for the definitive secret to the universe.
The ultimate truth.
Exactly. The thinker walks to the front, sits down, and instead of speaking a single word, he just holds up a flower
Oh, wow.
and smiles.
Just a smile.
Yeah. So my question for you, the listener, is would you get it? Would you understand the message? Or would you just sit there, waiting for the actual lecture to start?
I mean, I'd probably be waiting for the PowerPoint to load, honestly.
Right. Because today, we're attempting something of a paradox in this deep dive. We're using, well, a massive volume of words to explain a philosophy that explicitly, by its very definition, cannot be captured by words.
Yeah, it's the ultimate catch-22 of spiritual literature. You're trying to capture the infinite in a net woven entirely out of vocabulary.
Which is impossible.
Right. The concepts just slip right through the holes.
Yet that is exactly what our source material for today attempts to do. We are digging into this really fascinating 2011 essay. It's titled The Subtle Dharma Gate of Life and Death, and it's written by an author named Suveng.
And the ambition of this text is just staggering.
It really is. I mean, the mission for our deep dive today is to trace this ancient Zen Buddhist philosophy regarding the illusion of life and death, map out its pretty dramatic history,
And this is the best part.
yeah, extract the surprisingly practical, deeply psychological guide this text offers, like how to actually dismantle your ego and liberate your consciousness from suffering.
But, trying to teach a wordless philosophy feels a bit like trying to describe a new primary color to someone who has never seen it.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like, you can talk around it, right? You can describe the emotional resonance of the color, but you absolutely cannot force their visual cortex to, process it.
No, you can't. And Sveng actually admits this contradiction right out of the gate, doesn't he?
He does. He says if he were to just declare the truth with words, he'd basically be rebelling against the foundational teachings of the Buddha.
So to bridge the gap, he uses this phrase. He says he has to slide over the water.
I love that phrase.
We too. He's skimming the surface, offering pointers rather than absolute definitions. And he offers this really blunt disclaimer to the reader.
Oh, yeah, he does.
He says, whether you actually grasp this truth depends entirely on your level of practicing Tao, your destiny, and your root of wisdom.
Talk about setting expectations. But what's fascinating here is that the medium really is the message.
How so?
Well, to understand what Zufeng is trying to impart, we first have to look at how this secret understanding was historically passed down. It wasn't through textbooks or rigorous theological debates.
Right.
It was a direct transmission.
Which takes us right back to that scenario I mentioned at the start, the Lingtian Mountain Assembly.
Yes.
So picture this, the Buddha, Sakyamuni, is sitting in front of a massive gathering of his disciples. He holds up the flower, he smiles.
Utter silence falls over the crowd.
Total silence. Nobody gets it.
Yeah.
They're completely trapped in their expectations of a verbal teaching.
Except for one guy.
Exactly. One disciple, Mahakasyapa. He looks at the flower, understands completely, and offers a faint smile back.
And in that quiet, really profound moment of realization, the Buddha declares that he possesses the subtle Dharma gate.
The subtle Dharma gate.
Right. He describes it as a special understanding outside of the scriptures that does not rest on words or letters.
Which begins this incredibly exclusive lineage, right?
Yeah, a transfer from mind to mind, pure consciousness, communicating with pure consciousness. Mahakasyapa later transmits it to Ananda, and it just passes down this chain of patriarchs.
Until it reaches Bodhidharma.
Exactly. The 28th patriarch of Buddhism.
But here is where the physical geography shifts, and honestly, where a really deep irony enters the picture.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this.
So the 27th patriarch, Prajnantara, instructs Bodhidharma to take a specific robe and a begging bowl and carry them all the way from India to China.
Quite the road trip.
Yeah, and Bodhidharma makes the journey and becomes the first Chinese Zen Buddhist patriarch. But here's where I have to push back a little on the premise.
Go for it.
If this is a special message outside the scriptures that explicitly does not rely on physical objects,
Right.
why pass down a physical robe and bowl to prove you have a wordless truth? I mean, we were literally reading a written text about a philosophy that rejects texts centered on physical artifacts that represent non-physical enlightenment.
It's totally paradoxical, but what's fascinating here is that the human mind just constantly requires anchors.
Anchors.
Yeah. A direct mind-to-mind transmission is entirely abstract to anyone watching, right? Human beings, we live in this dense social reality governed by hierarchies and, like, visual proof.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So the robe and the begging bowl were never the truth themselves. They were just receipts.
Receipts.
Yeah, they were symbols proving to the rest of the monastery that the transaction of understanding had actually taken place.
Oh, like a diploma.
Perfect analogy.
Right, because the piece of paper isn't the complex neurobiology you learned in medical school.
Definitely not.
But you still need to hang it on your wall so your patients actually trust you to perform surgery on them.
Precisely. The physical items were social proof for the masses, but, and this is a big, but as soon as you rely on a physical object like a bowl to prove enlightenment, you invite human ego straight into the mix.
Because people start wanting the bowl.
Exactly. Suddenly, people aren't chasing the truth anymore, they're chasing the promotion.
Ah.
And that exact ego trap caused a massive crisis for the 5th Chinese patriarch, Master Hongren.
This is my favorite part of the history. So Master Hongren needed to name his successor, the 6th patriarch. And in his monastery, there was a very obvious choice.
The golden boy.
Right, Master Shangxiu. He was this highly reputed, deeply admired professor. He was the intellectual heavyweight that everyone just assumed was getting the promotion.
He was a done deal in their eyes.
But Hongren, using that direct mind-to-mind perception we talked about, realized the true successor wasn't the beloved professor at all.
It never is.
It was a guy named Huining, who was basically an unknown handyman and laborer in the monastery.
Which completely threatens the entire social hierarchy. Imagine recognizing raw, world-shifting architectural genius in the person, like pouring the concrete, rather than the lead senior partner of the firm.
It's the ultimate undercover boss scenario.
Yeah.
The janitor gets the keys to the entire empire over the CEO.
Yeah, and Hongren knew that if he just handed the sacred robe and bowl to the laborer, the establishment would absolutely revolt.
So he pulls a trick. He stages a stanza writing contest.
Brilliant move.
He challenges the monastery to write a poem demonstrating their understanding of the essence of mind. And he declares that whoever wins will receive the robe, the dharma, and the title of the 6th patriarch.
He effectively created a meritocracy of insight to just completely bypass the hierarchy of status.
And Huining, the handyman, wins.
He proves that true wisdom operates completely independently of academic reputation or social standing.
So he becomes the 6th and final patriarch of Zen. And I say final because after Huining, the treasury of the true Dharma eye, the physical robe, and the begging bowl were totally lost to history.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the loss of those physical artifacts is arguably the most essential development in the entire lineage.
Really, losing the sacred relics is the best thing that happened.
Absolutely, because the loss aligns perfectly with the philosophy they were meant to represent. As long as there's a physical robe to chase, human ambition will chase the robe instead of the Enlightenment.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
By losing the artifacts, the lineage basically forces humanity to stop looking at the finger pointing at the moon and to finally just look at the moon itself. It freed the philosophy from being owned or hoarded by an elite few.
You know, Schiffing actually makes a little joke about this in the text.
Oh yeah, he does.
He mentions that because he has written 5 very heavy, important articles on Zen, he considers himself the 7th patriarch.
Just casually crowning himself?
Right. A little bit of spiritual levity to remind us not to take the hierarchy too seriously, especially since the physical proof literally evaporated centuries ago.
So with the physical relics gone, we're forced to look directly at the wordless truth they represented. And this is where Xiaofeng's essay gets incredibly radical.
Yeah, we are shifting from history to some pretty wild existential physics here.
We really are. The core thesis of his text is that there is no life or death in life. And he capitalizes life in the text to distinguish it from just, like, biological survival.
Capital L life.
Exactly. He says what the world sees as death is merely an illusion. He actually calls everyday death the evolved deduction of the carrier.
Evolved deduction of the carrier. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a very dense, almost mechanical phrase for a spiritual text.
It sounds like an IT manual, right?
Yeah.
But it's brilliant when you unpack it. Think of it like a video game.
Right.
The carrier is your specific avatar on the screen. The avatar has a health bar. It has physical limitations within the game world. And when the health bar depletes, the avatar falls over.
Game over.
Right. From the perspective of the avatar, based on the coded evolution of that specific software, it deduces that existence has ended. It deduces death.
Okay, I'm with you.
But the player holding the controller hasn't died.
Oh, wow.
Capital L, life is the player. It is a non-material structure, completely independent of the game's clock. It has no limitations of time whatsoever.
And the text argues that the mechanism bridging the player and the avatar is consciousness, right?
Exactly. Consciousness originates from this non-material structure, and in turn, consciousness controls that structure.
So the physical body you and I have right now is just the temporary form rendered by life.
The avatar rendering on the screen?
That's wild. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Is dying basically just like walking through a doorway from one room into another?
Xue Feng puts it plainly. Human consciousness makes people. Animal consciousness makes animals. And if you develop your consciousness to the level of a celestial being or a Buddha, you will render the form of a celestial being or a Buddha.
So what we call death is not the end of life itself.
Not at all. It is a life transformation. You are simply, loading into a new server.
You travel from one dimension to another through what the text calls the gate of life and death.
Right.
And when a life crosses that gate, from our really limited perspective on this side, we mourn and call it death. But from the perspective of the dimension they are entering, it's celebrated as a birth.
It completely upends the existential terror of mortality.
It really does. It flips it upside down.
And this framing is deeply anchored in the Buddhist concept of emptiness, which the text quotes extensively.
I'm talking about emptiness.
Yeah, so the text states, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They neither begin nor end, are neither immaculate nor defiled, and neither complete nor deficient.
See, emptiness is one of those terms that, to an English speaker, usually sounds like a void or a vacuum, just nothingness.
Like an empty room.
Right. But in this context, it feels more like an ultimate unconditioned reality.
That's spot on. Emptiness doesn't mean nothingness. It means no fixed thingness.
No fixed thingness. I like that.
Because in this state of ultimate reality, there are no rigid physical forms, no biological decay, and therefore there's no death. And when you truly grasp this, the text says you dwell without thought coverings.
Okay, we need to unpack thought coverings because that is a vital mechanism in this philosophy. How does a thought physically, or I guess metaphysically, cover something?
Think about how you perceive a tree. You don't just see the raw, pulsing atomic reality of the tree.
No, I see bark, leaves, branches.
Right. Your mind instantly overlays the concept of tree, the biological category of oak, maybe the memory of a tree you climbed as a kid, or even an assessment of how much firewood it could produce.
Sure.
All those concepts are thought coverings. They literally blanket your perception of reality with your own ego, your biases, and your evolutionary needs.
So you're not seeing reality. You're seeing your own thoughts layered over it.
Exactly. When you strip away those thought coverings, you experience the wordless reality that the Buddha smiled at.
Yeah.
You attain nirvana. You are free from the illusion of life and death.
I mean, that cosmic perspective is stunning, but Suifeng immediately grounds it, doesn't he?
He has to.
Yeah, he acknowledges that as mortals, we have fleshy eyes.
Fleshy eyes.
Such a great term. We can't simply peer into higher dimensional space and verify that our consciousness is rendering an avatar.
Right. We're stuck in the meat suit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we take this out of the theoretical clouds and apply it to a normal person, someone dealing with a daily commute, a stressful job, paying rent, how do you actually apply this to reach liberation?
Well, this raises an important question, and it's where the brilliance of Suifeng's essay really shines. He provides the actual mechanics for dismantling those thought coverings.
The how-to guide.
Yes. He identifies 5 specific hindrances that trap us in samsara.
And samsara is the endless cycle of rendering form after form, right?
Exactly, the cycle of suffering.
Yeah.
And these 5 hindrances are greed, anger, ignorance, arrogance, and suspicion.
Now, anyone could look at that list and say, sure, those are bad things, I'll try not to do it.
Right, it sounds like generic moral advice.
But the text provides highly specific psychological definitions for each one that shift them from being just moral failings to actual mechanical errors in how we process reality.
Let's walk through them.
Let's start with ignorance, because this one fascinated me. Usually we think of ignorance as just not knowing the facts, right?
Yeah, like, I am ignorant of quantum physics.
Exactly. But here, Shuofeng defines ignorance as the belief that you are always right and never wrong.
That definition changes everything.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because if ignorance is the absolute certainty of your own rightness, it's no longer about intellect. It is entirely about ego.
Right. When you are convinced you are flawlessly right in an argument with your spouse or about a political ideology, you are rigidifying your thought coverings.
You're cementing the illusion of a separate, isolated self.
Exactly. To dismantle this hindrance, you don't need to read more books. You need to practice self-inquiry. You have to witness your own mind desperately clinging to its rightness. Realize that this rigidity is a structure you're building and consciously choose to let it go.
It's about breaking that feedback loop.
Yes.
Then there is anger. The text defines it as to detest, blame, and envy.
Notice the directionality of those verbs.
Outward.
Always outward. Detesting, blaming, envying, they were all ways of rejecting present reality and pushing the responsibility onto someone else. It tethers you to a state of perpetual conflict.
Which perfectly sets up the next one. Arrogance. Defined here as self-importance, pretentiousness, disdain, defiance, and the lack of a gracious, cherishing heart.
I love that phrasing, the lack of a gracious, cherishing heart.
It's beautiful because the opposite of arrogance in this framework isn't just like quiet humility. It's an active, gracious, cherishing heart toward the world.
When you disdain a coworker, you are fortifying the walls of your avatar. You're saying, I am separate from you and I am better.
But when you cherish them,
When you cherish them, you are dissolving the boundary between your consciousness and theirs. You are experiencing the interconnectedness of that capital L life.
man, that's profound. Okay, we also have greed, defined as the want to always possess more out of self-interest.
It's the ego's endless hunger for more territory, trying to expand the avatar's inventory because it mistakenly believes the game is reality.
Right. More money, more status, more things.
And finally, suspicion, which is being full of doubts, self-deceiving, and refusing to face facts. It's basically a refusal to trust the natural flow of life.
Swifeng states that overcoming these 5 hindrances will liberate you from samsara. And he adds this beautifully understated line. He says, the reason is very simple and easy to do, but putting it into real practice is difficult.
Simple, but not easy.
Because every single day, the world hands you an excuse to build those structures. Every time you get cut off in traffic and choose to simmer in anger and blame, you are literally actively constructing the thought coverings that blind you.
You are tightening the blindfold over your own fleshy eyes. Liberation isn't about escaping the physical world through some mystical portal. It's the granular, moment-by-moment work of noticing your need to be right, noticing your lack of a cherishing heart, and stepping out of that rigid structure.
You dismantle the ego so the pure consciousness can shine through.
That's the practice.
So we started today with the paradox of using words to explain the wordless, tracing it back to a silent smile and a flower.
We watched a secret lineage completely bypass the social hierarchy, proving that wisdom belongs to the insightful, not just the credentialed.
We explored the radical physics of a universe where consciousness is the software rendering the biology, making death merely a transition to a new server.
And we learned that the actual practical work of spiritual liberation happens in how we handle our everyday greed, anger, and arrogance.
It's been an incredible journey.
Yeah.
But we cannot close this deep dive without addressing the text's final, pretty chilling caveat.
Yeah, this part is intense. Xifeng issues a stark warning about the mechanics of this whole process.
Right, because even if you intellectually understand the illusion of life and death, you still have to mind where you go next.
Because consciousness controls structure. The momentum of your mind continues after the avatar falls.
So if you carry a dense, heavy consciousness of anger and greed through the gate of life and death,
The text plainly states you will head to the lower world and you will be miserable.
liberation from the fear of death does not grant you a free pass from the consequences of the consciousness you cultivate.
It is the ultimate accountability.
It really is. And it brings everything we've discussed out of the abstract and directly into your lap right now. The text insists that consciousness controls structure, that human consciousness renders humans, and animal consciousness renders animals.
So it all comes down to the present moment.
Exactly. So if the mindset you cultivate in this exact fleeting moment dictates the literal, non-material structure you will occupy when you pass through that doorway, what exact form are your daily thoughts actively building for you right now? When you look at the grievances you hold on to, your need to win every argument, or your lack of a cherishing heart, are you building a Buddha? Or are you building something else entirely?